You're a workhorse, easy to control, my ex-wife taunted during the divorce hearing, but I answered with, I don't remember driving to the courthouse. I know I did. I remember keys in hand, the metal click of the ignition, the sound of tires crunching on gravel, but not the drive itself, just white noise. Like my brain had decided to protect me from the details, like a parent shielding a kid's eyes during the gory part of a movie. But I do remember the smell of the hallway. Cold, sharp, something like bleach and aging paper. That institutional scent of things being scrubbed clean but never actually clean. It was the kind of place where the air made your skin feel like you were peeling. Fluorescent lights buzzed above me. People passed by, some in suits, others in jeans and regret. I wondered if they were here for the same reason. I wondered if any of them looked at me and saw it in my eyes, divorce. I kept smoothing my shirt. It was navy blue, one of the few nice ones I hadn't packed away. I'd ironed it the night before, which was the most effort I'd put into anything that week, or maybe longer. I wasn't eating much. Coffee kept me upright. I'd been losing weight. My mother said it looked good on me. I didn't tell her it came from anxiety and sleeping on a couch that bent in the middle like a dying flower. She was already sitting when I walked in. My ex-wife, Laura, her hair was pulled back the way she always wore it when she wanted to be taken seriously. She didn't look at me at first, just scrolled through her phone with this vacant calm that told me she'd been here longer than me, emotionally speaking. She had arrived at this ending months ago. I was still trying to read the map. Mr. Owens, Ms. Turner, the court assistant called us, as if using our names in those formal tones made this any less humiliating. As if titles could buffer us from the reality that we were two people who had failed each other so thoroughly, the state had to step in and divide the spoils. We walked into the room like strangers. I didn't know how to sit. I didn't know where to put my hands. I kept clasping and unclasping them in my lap. At some point the judge asked me a question and I realized I hadn't heard the last 10 seconds. I nodded and answered, "Yes, Your Honor," hoping it was the right answer. Laura's lawyer spoke first. I barely listened. Her voice was sharp and deliberate, like someone reading off a checklist: custody schedule, financial assets, timeline of separation. It felt like a presentation. I half expected her to bring out a slideshow. Here is where the marriage started to erode. Here is when my client stopped recognizing her husband. Here is Exhibit A, a photo of the moment she decided she'd rather be alone. Then Laura spoke. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't cry. Her tone was steady, almost robotic, and that made it worse. Because it meant this wasn't an emotional outburst. It wasn't a moment of heat. It was a decision made in a cold room with the lights on. He's a workhorse, easy to control. That's what she said. I felt the words before I understood them. Like a slap you register only after the sting sets in. The judge didn't flinch, no reaction, just typed something on his computer. I wanted to ask him if he heard her. I wanted to say, "Did you catch that? Did you hear the way she reduced me to a tool?" But no one blinked. And maybe that was the worst part, how normal it was to dissect a person in front of strangers, in public, like gutting a fish in a market. Hello, workhorse. I couldn't stop thinking about that word, not even the insult, the metaphor. Like she saw me not as a partner, not even as a person, but as a utility. Something bred for labor, predictable, domesticated. Easy to control. God, how long had she thought that? I remembered the way she used to run her hand down my back after a long day, the soft circles she'd draw with her fingers, her lips brushing my ear as she whispered, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I used to believe that was love. But now I wondered, had that always meant I love how useful you are to me? I tried to sit still. I tried not to show anything because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. But my legs started to bounce and I kept pressing my fingertips together so tightly my knuckles turned white. I watched her speak like I was watching someone I'd once known from across a crowded room. Familiar features, but none of the warmth. All that remained were the outlines. And still, some pathetic part of me hoped she'd look at me and soften. Oh, she didn't. When the judge asked if we had any final statements, I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, just air. I wanted to say I tried, I gave you everything, I sacrificed things you never even noticed. I wanted to say I lost myself loving you. And now I don't know how to put myself back together. Instead, I just shook my head. The judge nodded, something about the paperwork being filed, official dates, legal finality. His voice faded into the static in my head. I felt heat climb up my neck. I felt shame coil in my gut like a living thing. But mostly I felt tired, so tired. When it was over, I stood. Laura didn't. She stayed seated, gathering her purse, checking her phone, like we'd just finished a meeting about quarterly projections. Like she hadn't just dropped a bomb and walked away from the fallout. As I walked past her, I didn't say goodbye. That felt too generous. I didn't look at her. That felt too painful. I just walked. The courthouse doors were heavier than they looked. I pushed them open and stepped into a morning that had already begun without me. The sun was out, but it didn't feel warm. Nothing did. I stood on the steps, squinting into the light, and I realized something had shifted. Not just the end of a marriage, not just the sting of being dismissed like a broken appliance. Something inside me had cracked, quietly, fatally. A gear that had turned without question for years had finally rusted and stopped. I couldn't go back to who I was before her, but I also couldn't stay this. And maybe that was the beginning. Not a rebirth. Not redemption. Just the terrifying, silent moment when you realize the life you built is gone, and all that's left is the rubble, and the terrifying freedom to decide what to do with it. I had no answers, but I had legs, and they carried me away from that courthouse one step at a time. The first thing I noticed after the divorce was how loud the silence became. You think you're prepared for it, the emptiness. You imagine it'll be like turning off a TV, clean, immediate, but it's not like that. It's more like tinnitus, a low, constant hum just under the skin of everything. The hum of a life you once lived, now echoing in the spaces between your new one. I moved into a rental over a liquor store that had a neon beer sign flickering at all hours like it was short-circuiting itself into a seizure. The bedroom was small and slanted, like the walls were slowly caving in on each other. The kind of place where you could feel the weight of your decisions pressing down from the ceiling. There were 3 windows, none of them facing the sunrise. I brought only what I could carry in the first trip: clothes, a duffel bag, my shaving kit, and a cardboard box filled with Jamie's drawings and some loose photos I couldn't bring myself to throw out. Everything else was still at the old house. Our house, her house now. I left the furniture, I left the framed photos. I left the orange Le Creuset she used to make soup in when the seasons changed. I don't know why, but that one was hard. I stood in the kitchen with my hand on the handle of it for a long time. In the end, I left that too. The first night I slept on the mattress I bought from a guy named Craig, yes, as in Craigslist, who told me his girlfriend had just moved out. He gave me a discount and said, "Man, I get it." I didn't tell him I wasn't sure what part he thought I got. The springs dug into my back like tiny knives, and the room smelled like someone else's past. I couldn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting for some new identity to rise out of the drywall and make me someone else. Jamie came over the next weekend, 11 years old and already more emotionally intelligent than I was. He didn't say much, just looked around, took it all in with that quiet processing he does, then nodded like, "Okay, this is what it is now." He brought his Spider-Man pillow from the other house, called it the bridge. I didn't ask what he meant, I just told him I was glad he brought it. I made pancakes, burned the first batch, swore under my breath. Jamie looked at me like I'd thrown a brick at a window. I apologized right away. He didn't say it, but I could feel the question in the air. Are you going to be like this now? And I didn't know how to answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know who I was without her gaze. I had lived so long inside her expectations, kept the lights on, fixed the leaks, showed up to parent-teacher nights, remembered the birthdays of her coworkers. I wasn't a husband, I was a service provider. And now that the job was terminated, I was left standing in the break room of my own life with no plan. I went to work, stayed late even when I didn't need to, filled my hours with emails and spreadsheets and noise. My boss called me a team player. My coworkers said I looked laser-focused. No one knew I was falling apart between sentences, that some days I'd sit in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could will myself to get out of the car. Then I met Roger, Mid-40s, balding, divorced twice, called himself a relationship archaeologist. Said it with a grin that dared you to ask what the hell that meant. I didn't. I just laughed the way people laugh when they don't want to cry. He noticed me zoning out in the break room one afternoon, coffee gone cold in my hand. "Let me guess," he said, "you just got freed from the shackles of holy matrimony." I gave a half shrug, half nod. I didn't have the energy to say yes. Roger nodded back. First one stings the most, like losing a limb. You still feel it even when it's not there. We started having lunch together. Mostly vending machine sandwiches and black coffee that tasted like burnt wood, but somehow the ritual helped. He didn't give advice, not really, just told stories. Stories of how he lost himself in each marriage, how he thought he'd never feel whole again, how slowly, painfully he did. He told me healing was boring, that it wasn't some epic comeback montage. It's drinking water and going to therapy even when you don't think you need it, he said. It's keeping the plants alive, showing up for your kid, that's the stuff. So I showed up. I took Jamie to the movies. I bought a plant, a pothos, easy to keep alive. I downloaded one of those therapy apps and booked an appointment with a woman named Teresa who wore wool cardigans and asked hard questions in soft tones. The first thing she asked me was, "When did you stop trusting yourself?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I did. And I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. But something about the question stuck, like a splinter under the skin of my mind. I started to think back to the moments when I started to disappear, when compromise stopped feeling mutual, when love started sounding like a debt, and how I kept saying yes over and over until I no longer knew what I was saying yes to. Some nights I'd lie in bed staring at the water stain on the ceiling and think about how easy it is to become small, to make yourself manageable, to become easy to control. And how it doesn't happen all at once. It's tiny decisions, little silences, a series of swallowed sentences until there's no voice left. One night, I tried saying my own name out loud in the dark. "David," I whispered. It felt strange, like meeting someone for the first time. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's honest. And maybe that's where everything has to start. I don't remember the exact day she called, just the moment I saw her name flash across my screen and everything in my body froze. It was early spring. The kind of day where the wind still carried winter's breath, but the light was starting to change, longer, softer. I'd been in the middle of reorganizing the kitchen drawers. A dumb, mindless task, the kind you do when you're trying not to think. I had a screwdriver in one hand and a spoon in the other when her name appeared. Laura. No message, just the call. I let it ring until the silence reclaimed the room. Then, after a minute, I called her back. "I need to talk to you," she said. No greeting, no hesitation, just that same even unaffected tone I remembered from the courthouse. "Okay," I said carefully. "Is Jamie all right?" "He's fine," she said. "This isn't about him, it's about us." Us? That word still felt like glass in my mouth. We agreed to meet at that park near the edge of town, halfway between her new place and mine. Neutral territory. I hadn't been there since we used to bring Jamie to feed the ducks. The same bench was there, faded green paint chipped at the edges. I sat down and tried not to rehearse what I might say. I already knew it wouldn't go that way. She showed up 10 minutes late, wrapped in a light coat, hair down this time. No makeup, no armor. She sat next to me, left a space between us. "I wasn't fair to you," she said eventually. "That day in court I was angry." "You were honest," I said, maybe a little sharper than I meant to. "That was worse." She looked down at her hands, turning her wedding ring between her fingers before I realized it was just a cheap silver band now. The real one was long gone. "I didn't mean to reduce you to," she paused, like she couldn't even say it. "The Workhorse," I finished. Oh, she flinched. "I was scared," she admitted. "I felt trapped, but it wasn't just you doing the trapping, it was me too. We built something that neither of us fit in anymore. I think we both knew that." I nodded, but it was hollow. I still felt the bitterness sitting at the back of my throat like it had roots. "I let you control everything," I said. "Not because you forced me to, but because it made things easier. If I just kept saying yes, if I just kept carrying things, then I didn't have to think about who I was or what I wanted. I know, she said quietly. I think I loved how steady you were until I started resenting it, until I saw you weren't asking for anything in return. You just disappeared. I didn't know how to ask, I said. I thought love meant not needing. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that presses into your ears and forces you to hear your own thoughts. A kid threw bread into the pond nearby, and the ducks skated across the water like they'd been waiting for that moment all day. I forgive you, I said, not because I'd planned to, but because it rose in me like a wave I couldn't stop. Not just for what you said, but for not seeing me. She swallowed, her eyes were wet, but she didn't let the tears fall. Thank you, she whispered. I wasn't sure you ever would. Well, I wasn't sure either, I said. We didn't hug, didn't promise to stay in touch. We weren't those people anymore. That bridge was burned not in hatred but in necessity. Some structures can't hold new weight. Oh, she left first. Oh, I stayed. I watched the ducks circle the pond again and again like they were tethered to some invisible orbit. I thought about how much of my life had followed that same path, circling, repeating, performing steadiness even when everything inside me was splintering. And for the first time, I didn't feel like circling anymore. For the first time, I felt something in me stand still and breathe. I didn't want to be anyone's beast of burden. I didn't want to carry love like a weight that proved my worth. I wanted softness, I wanted stillness. I wanted to be a man who didn't have to earn rest. And that's when I knew I wasn't waiting anymore, not for her to change, not for someone new to save me, not for a better version of me to emerge from the wreckage. I was already here. Scarred, tired, quieter than I used to be, but here. I was still standing. I was still mine. And that was enough. That was the answer. It didn't happen in a single moment. No montage, no catharsis, just time passing in ordinary ways. I started waking up without that sudden punch of dread in my chest. Not every day, some mornings it still came, like a ghost standing at the edge of the bed, but less, and that was something. I stopped checking her social media, not out of spite, not even out of healing, just forgetfulness, like she became less central to the story I was living. The pothos plant started growing, thick green vines curling toward the light. I read somewhere that plants lean toward what feeds them, so I moved it closer to the window, watched it stretch, reach, find its shape again. Like I was trying to. Jamie started bringing over more of his things, a stack of books, his lava lamp, a drawing he taped to the fridge of the two of us sitting under a rocket ship. We were stick figures, both smiling. He gave me hair. I haven't had hair in years, but still I kept it there. Like a reminder of how he saw me, still sees me. I asked him one night, just before bed, if he was okay with how things were now. He looked at me with that quiet, wise expression of his and said, "You seem lighter." I didn't cry until after he went to sleep. I started cooking again, not out of duty, not to impress anyone, just for myself, things I liked. I learned how to make curry from scratch, bought a cast iron pan. I burned a lot of meals. But sometimes I'd sit down at the little table by the window, steam rising from a bowl, and think I made this for no one but me. And that was new and holy in a way. I walked more, no destination, just feet moving forward. I stopped listening to music all the time. I wanted to hear the wind, the click of my boots on gravel, the rustle of leaves underfoot, the sound of being alone but not lonely. There's a difference. It took me a long time to hear it. One morning, I caught my reflection in a storefront window and didn't look away. That felt like progress. I wrote more, not big things, not novels or anything people would read. Just thoughts on napkins, in the Notes app, in the margins of receipts. I wrote things like you're allowed to rest and not everything that ends is a failure and the softness you want begins with you. I don't know who I was writing for, maybe myself a few months ago. Maybe for the man who still sometimes wakes up in a cold sweat thinking he has to fix something he didn't break. Then there was the woman at the library. Her name was Mara. She laughed with her whole face. It caught me off guard. I hadn't heard a laugh like that in a long time, not around me anyway. We talked over a shared disgust for a book cover redesign, one of those conversations that stretches time. I didn't ask for her number, I didn't flirt, I just thanked her for the talk. and I left with this odd warmth in my chest, not hope exactly. Just the idea that maybe someday there could be space again for joy that wasn't tied to survival. Some days are still hard, I still forget things, still get hit with old grief like a gust of cold air that finds you even indoors. But I don't run from it now, I let it move through me, like weather, it always passes. I don't think about what she's doing anymore. I don't carry the versions of myself she saw or didn't see. I've stopped rehearsing arguments we never had. I've stopped needing to be understood by her to understand myself. That's the thing no one tells you about healing. It's boring, it's dishes. It's buying a new toothbrush, it's making your bed. It's saying no to things that drain you and yes to things that confuse you but feel oddly right. It's saying your own name in the dark and not flinching. I still have the shirt I wore to the divorce hearing, blue button-up. I found it in the back of the closet the other day, thought about throwing it away. But I didn't, not because I'm holding on, but because it's part of the story and I'm not ashamed of it anymore. That version of me, the man who sat there silent, called a workhorse, he survived, he walked out. And now I'm here. I'm not perfect, I still overthink, still feel like I have to earn rest some days, but I'm softer, slower. I've learned the power of not needing to be loud to be whole. And when I look around at this life, humble, quiet, self-made, I don't see failure anymore. I see a home. I see a man. And that's how I answered her. Not with revenge, not with a dramatic comeback, but with a life she never imagined I could build without her. Mine.